what if the very logic you're using to succeed in life,
Yeah.
I mean, the reason, the science, those careful, 10-year plans, what if that's the exact thing guarantee you'll never actually reach your full potential?
It's a pretty intense thought, yeah.
Right. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today we have this really fascinating stack of source material drawn from the writings of Feng and this movement called Lifechanyuan.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to explore this unique, highly intricate spiritual and psychological hierarchy of humanity. Because usually, when you ask someone to map out their life, they just draw a timeline.
Right, a timeline.
Yeah, like as a straight chronological path. You're born, you get a job, you retire.
Which is a completely horizontal way of looking at existence.
Exactly.
And the texts we're analyzing today, they just throw that horizontal timeline entirely out the window. They present this vertical, multidimensional coordinate system instead. And the core premise here is incredibly bold. It's that without this specific coordinate system, your life is, well, it's essentially just a tangled mess.
A mess, right.
Yeah. The author argues that without understanding exactly where you sit on this vertical map, you might literally live and die without ever grasping what your existence was actually about.
Okay, let's unpack this, because whether you're, a highly analytical person who lives by the spreadsheet, or maybe you're someone deeply spiritual who goes to retreats all the time, this framework actively challenges how we measure human progress.
Oh, completely.
We're moving away from external milestones, right? Like wealth or followers or status. And we're focusing entirely on the internal driving force of human nature. Like, what is actually at the wheel of your life?
Yeah, the core drive.
Right. And the text lays out these 5 specific tiers of humanity, and they're grouped into 3 main levels. You've got the lower, the middle, and the upper levels. Let's start at the bottom.
Sounds good. So the baseline of this entire philosophy, it categorizes people by that dominant internal drive you mentioned. And at the lower level, you have 3 distinct types.
Okay.
First, you have the ignorant people who are entirely driven by instinct.
Right.
Then above them are worldly people, and they're driven by desire. And finally, you have mortals who are driven by emotion.
Let's break down the mechanics of those lower tiers, because I think realistically, most of us spend a lot of time bouncing between them.
No, definitely. Everyday life is mostly in these tiers.
Yeah. So when the text says ignorant people are driven by instinct, it isn't like throwing around an insult, right?
No, not at all.
It's just describing a state of operating purely on biological survival and immediate sensory reaction. Like, you're cold, so you seek heat.
Yeah.
You're hungry, you eat.
Exactly. But that biological baseline, it offers no long-term stability. So human nature kind of evolves to the next tier, which is the worldly person.
Driven by desire.
Right, desire. And this is where we see the accumulation of resources. But the mechanism of desire is perpetual lack.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the moment you acquire the nice house, you immediately want the bigger house.
Or you get the promotion, but now you want the corner office.
Exactly. It's a classic hedonic treadmill.
Which naturally leads to the realization that, material status just isn't enough, which pushes us into the 3rd tier, the mortal.
The mortal tier, driven by emotion.
We seek validation. We crave interpersonal connection. We get totally swept up in the drama of our relationships. When the text says mortals are driven by emotion, are we talking about like the person who makes a major career decision based entirely on whether their boss praised them that day?
Yes. Or, whether they had a bad fight with their partner that morning and now everything is ruined.
Right, right.
And that emotional volatility is exactly why those 3 tiers, instinct, desire, and emotion, are all grouped at the bottom.
Because they're chaotic.
Inherently chaotic and reactive. You're just constantly at the mercy of external forces, the economy, your bodily needs, other people's moods. And to explain how deeply ingrained these drives are, the author uses this fantastic metaphor.
Oh, the stone analogy.
Yes, the stones. So the author points out that stones are not just one uniform material, right?
Yeah.
You have plain pebbles, blue stones, flint, but then you also have rubies, sapphires, moonstones, emeralds, and diamonds.
Yeah.
They're all technically stones, but they possess these wildly different intrinsic characteristics and values.
So let's apply that to human behavior. Because you don't use a diamond to spark a fire, right? And you definitely don't use flint in a high-speed industrial drill bit.
No, it would shatter.
Exactly. So the text is arguing that humanity has these intrinsic mineral properties almost. If you take someone whose intrinsic nature is flint, meaning they're operating purely on that reactionary survival instinct, and you place them under the crushing pressure of, say, leading a massive organization.
They aren't going to magically turn into a diamond.
Right. They're going to completely shatter under the friction.
And conversely, a diamond doesn't have to strive to be a diamond. It simply possesses that structural integrity by nature.
That makes sense.
You can't expect someone who is trapped in the emotional volatility of a mortal to navigate a crisis with the unshakable clarity of someone operating at a higher frequency.
It sounds incredibly similar to, like, upgrading a computer's operating system.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right.
No.
Like, instinct is the base hardware.
Yeah.
It just keeps the machine's power running. Desire and emotion, those are your basic everyday apps that just constantly demand your attention and drain your battery.
Notifications constantly going off.
Yes. And to escape that constant system crash, human nature tries to build a firewall against those feelings, which brings us to the high-level software, which is reason.
Reason, exactly.
Which is the domain of the middle tier, the sage. And I actually want to ask you, the listener, right now, which operating system is running your life today? Are you reacting to things, or are you reasoning through them?
Because sages, they have transcended those lower drives of instinct, desire, and emotional chaos.
Right.
Because they operate on logic, the text explicitly calls sages the backbone of human civilization and the guardians of morality.
Wow.
They are the maintainers of harmony. A sage relies on science, empirically proven facts, and the wisdom distilled from millennia of human experience.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Think about how countercultural this sage figure is to our modern societal hustle.
Oh, totally.
We live in a world that is just obsessed with disruptors. We idolize people who break the rules, who go viral, who get rich quick, or who just jump to the center of the latest outrage on social media.
The loudest voices.
Right. But the sage deliberately rejects all of that. The text says they don't seek overnight fame, they don't desire sudden wealth, they don't seek revenge, and they don't deliberately place themselves at the center of controversies.
They don't want the spotlight.
No. They even avoid decorating their homes lavishly. Like, they avoid anything that looks like a palace or, quote, a brothel.
Yeah, they practice moderation in absolutely everything. They reason through matters instead of getting into irrational disputes. And they gladly help others without expecting any favors in return.
Wow.
And their defining characteristic is sheer stoic resilience. The metaphors the text uses here are incredibly vivid.
Oh yeah, tell me about those.
Sages are compared to trampled grass that somehow just survives massive floods and constant grazing.
Jeez.
Or the Robinson Crusoe stranded on a deserted island but refusing to despair. Or a camel trudging through a barren desert, just pressing on as long as there's even a single shred of energy left.
Okay, wait, I need to push back on this a little bit on behalf of the listener.
Sure.
Because the text paints a picture of this relentless, noble grind, right? It says they don't oppose the government and they avoid controversy. But historically, hasn't societal progress relied on people getting angry?
That's a common argument.
Right. Like, hasn't it relied on people causing controversies to oppose bad governments or unjust systems? Doesn't this framework kind of encourage total complacency?
So that is a crucial challenge, but the text argues against the idea that emotional rebellion equals true progress.
Okay.
When a mortal, someone driven by emotion rebels, they often just end up replacing one chaotic tyrant with another because their actions are rooted in anger, not lasting order.
Oh, I see.
Sages aren't complacent. They're foundational. You cannot build and advance civilization on emotional outrage.
Right. The system would just collapse.
Exactly. You need the people who calculate the structural integrity of the bridges, who maintain the supply chains, who literally keep the lights on while everyone else is arguing.
Yeah.
That is why they are the backbone. They provide the stable ground that allows any progress to happen in the first place.
So the impact of a sage's quiet, logical life is actually profound stability.
Yes.
The text notes that simply being around a sage brings this sense of security, inner peace, and it even sharpens the thinking of others.
Very much so.
And in fact, a major goal of the Lifechanyuan movement, according to the sources, is to gather these sages together. They believe sages are currently scattered across remote villages and modest dwellings all over, and they need to be brought together to lead humanity out of Egypt. moving toward a land flowing with milk and honey.
Yeah, the sage is the ultimate vehicle for societal salvation in a very practical sense. They organize the chaos.
Which brings us to the massive, glaring question of this entire deep dive.
A big pivot.
It's a huge pivot.
Yeah.
Sages sound like the absolute pinnacle of human evolution, right? They're logical, selfless, resilient, and they literally hold society together. So why on earth are they only the middle tier? What could possibly sit above logic and reason?
And this introduces the core tension of the entire philosophy. Sages have a fatal flaw.
A fatal flaw.
Yes. Reason has a hard ceiling.
Okay.
Sages will readily accept scientific knowledge and empirical facts, but when they are faced with the boundless, unquantifiable mysteries of the universe, when they actually need to transcend conventional thinking, they freeze.
They just stop.
They become bewildered, they're at a loss, and they become deeply resistant.
So, mechanically, how does reason break down? Because the text uses this brilliant analogy here involving a 100-kilogram scale.
Oh, the scale analogy is perfect.
All right, if you're weighing items under 100 kilos, the scale works perfectly. It's a flawless tool for understanding reality.
Yep.
But the second you place, like, a 500-kilo car on that bathroom scale, it doesn't just give you an inaccurate number.
No, it breaks.
The springs snap. The
Yeah.
tool is entirely destroyed by the magnitude of the problem.
Exactly. The tool itself becomes the limitation. And to drive this home, the author shares this jarringly mundane but really revealing anecdote.
Let's hear it.
He writes about a friend who came to his house to swim in a deep pool. And this friend could swim perfectly, using standard mechanics, for exactly 5 meters.
Okay, 5 meters.
But the moment he passed that 5-meter mark and realized he was over the deep end, he just lost his nerve.
Yeah.
He completely abandoned his technique, started floundering in place, and almost drowned.
Wow. It perfectly captures the panic of losing the bottom.
Exactly.
The sage is totally fine in the shallow end of the pool of knowledge, where their feet can touch empirical facts. But in the deep end of existence, logic just flounders.
And then the text scales this concept all the way up to astrophysics.
Right.
It brings up Newton's cosmic escape velocities. If an object travels at 7.9 kilometers per second, it achieves orbit around the Earth.
Okay.
If it hits 11.2 kilometers per second, it breaks Earth's gravity but is still trapped by the sun's gravity in the solar system.
Let me make sure I'm following this. Are the sources actually arguing that our greatest intellectual achievements, like Newton's physics or Einstein's speed of light, are actually intellectual cages?
Yes, that is exactly what they're saying. Sages look at 7.9 kilometers per second and say, we have figured out the ultimate rule of orbit. We will stay here safely.
Wow.
To the sage, formulas are safety, but to the universe, formulas are boundaries.
Yeah.
The text argues that if we treat these scientific limits as absolute boundaries for all of existence, including human consciousness, humanity is doomed to be forever trapped on Earth, just locked in a cycle of fighting over food, clothing, and shelter.
Because the sage tries to impose human limits on a limitless cosmos.
Exactly.
And that is why sages are only one step away from the ultimate truth. The text uses this incredibly striking metaphor to visualize this transition.
The withered vine.
Yes, the withered vine. It describes the sage as someone hanging onto a withered vine dangling over a cliff.
Yeah.
The Buddha looks down and says, let go.
Right.
And if they let go, they step into the ranks of the saints. But the rational sage looks down at the abyss, tries to calculate the velocity of the fall, gets completely terrified, and just refuses to drop into the unknown.
And if the sage refuses to empty their mind, if they refuse to abandon their rigid need to measure and control absolutely everything, they perish along with the withered vine.
They just fall anyway.
Yeah, they remain stuck in the middle tier forever.
Okay, so let's say the sage finally musters the courage to let go of the vine of reason. What exactly are they falling into? Because this is where we reach the upper tier, the saint or the celestial.
Right. To become a saint, one must completely abandon pure rationality and achieve what the text describes as a spiritual resonance with the way, or the Tao.
Okay, translate that for me.
Yeah.
Because quoting ancient concepts like the Tao sounds great on paper, but if I'm a sage currently clinging to my life plan spreadsheet over a cliff edge,
Mm-hmm.
what does taking the way as the door actually look like on a random Tuesday morning?
It requires a complete shift in operation. Remember, the sage is defined by relentless effort. They are the camel trudging through the desert.
Right.
But the saint operates on the principle of wu-wei, which roughly translates to non-action or effortless action.
So mechanically, how does someone accomplish anything with non-action? Are they just like sitting around waiting for the universe to provide?
Not at all. Think of the difference between an engineer trying to survive a massive ocean wave and a professional surfer riding that same wave.
Okay, I like that.
The sage is the engineer. They're furiously trying to calculate the hydrodynamics of the wave. They're treading water, burning massive amounts of energy to fight the current.
Right.
The saint is the surfer. They don't fight the wave. They feel its momentum, align their board with the existing energy, and just ride it effortlessly to the shore.
Oh, wow.
The text says the saint knows without taking action, recognizes without being seen, and accomplishes without striving. They align with the natural order instead of trying to muscle it into submission.
So they totally transcend personal biases and fixed conclusions?
Exactly.
And the imagery shifts entirely here, too. Instead of trampled grass, the text describes the saint as a spiritual herb, specifically a lingzi mushroom bestowed by heaven. They absorb the essence of the sun and moon.
And the lingzi mushroom has deep, deep roots in traditional Eastern philosophy as this miraculous life-giving elixir.
Right.
By comparing a saint to this herb, the text signifies that their very existence is a healing, organic force for the world, rather than a mechanical one.
And the sources offer specific examples of who reached this ultimate peak. They name Jesus, Sakyamuni, who is the Buddha, and Laozi.
Yes.
And just to clarify for you listening, we are neutrally reporting the text's philosophical blending here. We aren't endorsing a specific theology or religion.
Right, just looking at the framework.
Exactly. But it's fascinating to see how the author takes these really distinct global figures and positions them as the absolute pinnacle of this specific coordinate system, defined by their ultimate selflessness. Like, the more they give to others, the more they have.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it perfectly illustrates the cosmic utility of the saint.
How so?
Well, we established that sages manage society day to day. They keep the lights on.
Right.
But saints save society. The text actually quotes the ancient strategist Zhuge Liang. He says, "To save the suffering and the troubled is the work of the saint." In times of massive existential turmoil, when the sage's logic and resilience are completely overwhelmed when that 100-kilo scale breaks, it is only the profound, resonant wisdom of the saint that can guide humanity out of the dark.
So what does this all mean for us? We've traveled from the reactionary instincts of the ignorant person through the endless desires of the worldly, past the emotional storms of the mortal.
Yep, the whole journey.
We climb the arduous, deeply logical mountain of the sage, and finally let go of the vine to free fall into the spiritual resonance of the saint. How do we practically apply this massive framework to our lives?
The text provides a very direct directive, actually. Sprint.
Sprint.
First, strive to become a noble person by mastering your lower drives. Then, swiftly attain the logical, selfless resilience of the sage. And finally, without pausing to get comfortable in your logic, empty your mind and push toward the highest realm of the saint.
And there is a literal cosmic incentive at the end of this journey, isn't there?
Oh, yes.
The text claims there are 80 billion celestial islands waiting in a celestial islands continent for perfected beings to inhabit.
80 billion.
But right now, too few people meet the standards because they're either trapped in the lower tiers of emotion or they're stuck in the intellectual cages of the sage.
It is the ultimate way of saying that unimaginable potential and freedom await those who are willing to continually upgrade their spiritual operating system, letting go of whatever tier currently makes them feel safe.
We all start somewhere on this human coordinate system. Most of us probably spend our days bouncing around the lower levels, reacting out of basic instinct, chasing a slightly better lifestyle, or getting swept up in emotional drama.
Yeah, the everyday noise.
And many of us strive incredibly hard to be the sage. We want to be the rational, grounded person who holds it all together for our family or our company when things get tough.
The backbone.
Right. But this deep dive challenges us to realize that to understand the deepest truths of our existence, rationality simply isn't enough. I want to ask you directly, where are you on this map today?
Good question.
Are you currently operating as a mortal, driven largely by your emotional reactions? Or are you operating as a sage, relying entirely on facts and resilience? And if you do fancy yourself a logical sage, are you brave enough to recognize the 100-kilogram limit of your own reasoning?
That is the ultimate challenge. We spend our whole lives trying to build a perfectly logical, measurable framework for our world. But what if the very act of defining the universe is exactly what prevents you from truly experiencing it?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.